Om Nam Chan San Permai Gesan Po Lai Yan Sen Kögin Öndü Pie Man Jung Shi Sun Drai Kurdu Kandram Manpe Kur Jin Jin Jesa Dadar Ki Shinjen Lakchen Sexus So Guru Pema Ninja Nam Chan San Permai Gesar Lai Yan Sen
Say,
Ging
Arjuna,
Permai
Emajune Shisu,
Berai Urdu Kandram Ante Kur Jin Jin Jesu Dandaki Jen Lakjen Sexu So Guru Pema Sinjin Orange Nam Chan San Permai Gesan Po Lai An Sen De Pinhe Man Jung Shi Sun Drai Kurdu Kandram Ante Koren Jin Sun Dandu Ki Shinjen Lakchen Sexu So Guru Pema Pinjin Sanje Chodan Sanchi Anjan Cho Bardo Dani Chab Sun Chin Dai Ge Jin So Jipe So Nan Chi Brula Pinjin Sanje Drupa So Sanje Chodan Sun Chi Nang Lan Jan Chu Dan He Chab Sun Chin Dai Gi Jing Sun Ji Pen Sun An Chi Drula Pen Jin San Je Drupa So Sanje Chodan Sun Chi Chonang Lan Jan Chu Bardo Dani Chab Sun Chin Dai Gi Jing Sun Ji Pen Sun Ai Chin Drula Pinjin Sanje Drupa and so, Om Ha Hum Belzara Guru Pema Siji Hum. Om Ha Hum Belzara Guru Pema Siji Hum. Belzara Guru Pema Siji Hum. Om Ha Hum Belzara Guru Siji Hum. Om Ha Hum Belzara Hum. Om Ha Hum Belzara Guru Pema Siji Hum. Om Ha Hum Belzara Pema Siji Hum. On ha hom belzara guru pema sije hom. 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 On ha hom belzara sije hom. On ha hom belzara guru pema sije hom. On ha hom belzara guru pema sije hom. On ha hom belzara guru pema sije hom. On ha hom belzara pema sije hom. On ha hom belzara guru 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 pema sije hom. On ha hom belzara pema sije hom. On ha hom belzara guru pema sije hom. Gantem para gantem Rasangatem Burgin Suhawanga Tegante Aragante Rasangatem Burgin Sohawanga Tegante Aragante Gante Bunje Sohawanga Gante Agate Arasangate Jinsohawanga Gante Para Gantem parasanga Tembunjin sohawi Tegara Gante parasanga Tembunjin sohawi Gante Paragante Parasanga Tembunji So Bom dia.
Good morning. I'd like to begin thanking the Sangha for organizing everything. For me, everything works in a magical way because I just arrived at the place and everything is already set up, everything is already ready, established. I don't know if you have already told people that today there will be no lunch, only on the 8th. I'd also like to thank the Sangha because I can't even explain. It's wonderful. The Sangha is the Buddha. If Buddha didn't give the teachings, we wouldn't understand. And if we didn't understand and when we understand what the Buddha says, our life changes, it transforms. It's very incredible. And then suddenly we are in the same room and we become the Sangha and we begin operating together. And when we meet the people who belong to the Sangha, we have a common basis. And this is also incredible because samsara doesn't offer a possible way for us to understand what's going on. And the Dharma offers this. And when we understand somehow the Dharma, we manifest ourselves as the Sangha, because by the blessings of the Buddha who gave the teaching, our transformation becomes possible. This is a very profound process. And this is not a process that it stops. We're constantly transforming this. In the beginning, we feel that we are an identity following the path and also doing other things. We have our life and then we practice a little bit, and then we have our life and we practice a little bit. But as the time goes on, we start wondering, this that I call my life, what is this? And then it becomes a little bit strange because we start to contemplate our life, and it looks like a succession of transitory things in all the aspects that we focus within samsara are aspects that appear and cease. And there is nothing that is effective. And when we look in this way, we think, well, I'm here, there must be some kind of seriousness. Things are here in this way, they have to be serious. But things are not serious, and we don't understand how all of this is possible. In the beginning, when we hear about impermanence, it looks like something new. But then later, when we hear about impermanence, we realize that it's completely natural because things arise through dependent arising, and they don't have a solidity. They don't have an external solidity independent from us. And there are many other intelligences building the realities, not only ours. So it's natural that everything's always changing. And then we progress in this way. But I think one of the most important aspects in our path is to recognize that there is a level of lucidity that is possible. The Buddha came, he understood everything, he understood samsara. He manifested an understanding that overcomes all the common views. And then somehow we begin to have this intuition also. We begin to move according to the blessings that Buddha offered and is still offering to us. When we understand this aspect, at some level, we develop that which is called Guru Yoga. We develop a confidence in the Buddha, a confidence in the teachings of the Buddha, and a confidence that when we look and we see ourselves within the Sangha following a path, we test these views and our view becomes deeper. This perspective of deepening the view brings us to a notion that we're accumulating knowledge, accumulating texts. So just like in samsara, we can study, we can learn, we can memorize. For during some time in our path, we do the same. We study, we acquire things. But with time, we begin to have contact with teachings like Prajna Paramita, for example, and we realize wisdom is naturally a reason, and this becomes the central point of our practice. When we discover that even though the Buddha gave the 84,000 Buddhas, it's as though the teachings of the Buddha continued to be offered constantly in all appearances, in everything that we can see. All ordinary appearances present directly, they reveal directly the way by which they appear. Appearances are non-dual with our mind, with the mind of beings. So the fact that they have this life, that they manifest this life and this richness in the very appearance, it allows us to recognize the Dharma that is incessantly present in front of us in all the multiple experiences, not only with the five senses, but also internally in our body and in the subtle aspect of all the mental processes of energy. We begin to look to this vast field, and we recognize this vast field as the field where the Buddha presents the teachings and they are alive. So for some time, we contemplate these teachings and we understand that Buddha was speaking from this experience, and all the other masters that came afterwards, they also speak according to this experience, based on this experience. And we should also look inwardly. We should learn to look inwardly and to find the teachings in a natural way based on all the multiple experiences. So at this moment, our practice becomes a practice that is more solid. We overcome the path of the hearer, which is the path in which we're listening the teachings from the outside. So the teachings look a little bit artificial. It's as though they came from the outside. They don't come from inside. They're like an information. But then we acquire some maturity because when these teachings, when we see them as information, we forget them. They don't manifest energy. So we start to look inwardly, to contemplate inwardly, and we start naturally to see how things work. And then we behave in a clearer way according to how things present themselves. And then our practice becomes more mature. And then we also begin to investigate. The mind contemplates the mind and realizes, understands how wisdom manifests and how the errors manifest and the fixations in the different realms, how they manifest themselves. When we're contemplating in this way, in a wider way, the very notion of an identity that is following the path begins to disappear because we see that we're manifesting in different environments with different forms, with different languages, operating with different mental marks, and then progressively we recognize that we are not these mental marks. We are not these energy dispositions. We are not these responses to the different situations. So this is a very important stage in which we no longer need to transport an identity in the path. We recognize the freedom that allows the manifestation of different identities in different environments and in different moments. And we understand what the word Nirmanakaya means, the emanation bodies of the Buddha, how the Buddha manifests in different bodies, in different realms, so that he can help the beings and communicate with the beings wherever they are. We also understand the arms of Chenrezig that represent the 1,000 Buddhas and all the different ways of reaching the different places and listening to beings within their particular worlds. So Chenrezig is able to manifest with 11 heads and 1,000 arms because he's essentially the primordial Buddha. He is this free nature that manifests in different ways for the benefit of beings who are fixated in different worlds. They arise within specific experiences and they are imprisoned within those experiences. So the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas manifest this freedom to arise in different environments. So this journey of the Buddha that we're now remembering during this period of the retreat, this is the journey in which he first appears as a prince. He is somebody, and then he rises from this condition of prince and manifests another identity, and this identity follows the path. And so he's always perfectioning this in search of a better, more correct identity. But as he does it, he also gets freed of these identities in the process. So this is the path that Buddha discovered. We can use the word path, but we can also think that more than a path, the Buddha saw reality as it is. When we think of a path, we always think of somebody following a path. Generally, when we're speaking of a path, there is somebody who is following the path. But this path, it remains for a while and then it disappears. And then it becomes lucidity. And there is no longer a path. We have this lucidity. It's open. We can check if it's open, if it's alive, if it's clear, or if we're involved in different aspects of samsara, if we're manifesting as identities that like and dislike, and so on. So in this period, from today until the 8th, we're gonna remember all these different situations, and we're gonna contemplate as a practice the different stages that the Buddha went through. Still, there are many details, and I think we're not going to be able to go deeply into all of these details of how the Buddha trained and all the different instructions that he received from different masters, how he discovered that those instructions were limited, and how he progressed. These teachings are described as the different jhanas. Jhanas are meditative states, particular meditative states that the Buddha developed. So when we sit in meditation, so when we're looking for enlightenment in meditation, in a way we are following this path of the jhanas. I have the aspiration of bringing this in detail So these teachings, they are being translated right now. These teachings about the jhanas, and we're probably gonna publish this, but this is a project for 2023. It's for something for the future. So we didn't have time to do it this year yet. So now we have this retreat until the 8th, and then there are the retreats of January and February. And then in March, we will have again those teachings of 15 days. And in one of those teachings, I intend to contemplate the path of the jhanas. So we're going to do that in the future, but here we're not going to go deeply into the jhanas. I'm just going to mention them generally. My idea is to examine the teachings based on view, meditation, and action. My idea is to take Dudjom Rinpoche's teachings, light of primordial wisdom, as the basis, and also to present the teachings about shamatha that are present in this text, and to deepen the teachings about shamatha. So those of us who are here, we have practiced a little bit of shamatha, so it's find out how to overcome this obstacle. So until the day of Buddha's enlightenment, the 8th, we don't have much time. Buddha sat beneath the tree and just went, and this is what we're doing now. So there is this this path that has to do with meditation. And we also have the specific teachings of light of primordial wisdom by Dudjom Rinpoche, which presents the view. We rest the mind, and since we have the freedom to rest our mind, we can work on vipassana. And then we go until the end. When we are examining the end of these teachings, it's always a return to the world, because it's the stage of action and fruition. And in this stage of action and fruition, I'm going to bring the teachings of the Diamond Sutra, which are the teachings on compassion, joy, equanimity, all the paramitas, and all the immeasurables, the 6 paramitas and the 4 immeasurables. So we're gonna examine these aspects based on the teachings of the Diamond Sutra. This is offered in an impersonal way. So how can we practice generosity, morality, and etc. without a sense of I, without anything that is solid? So this is the challenge of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas within the practice of action in the world. They understand the identities and appearances, but they are not imprisoned by them. They are not fixated on them. So I'm going to bring the Diamond Sutra from this perspective of action in the world. We're also going to contemplate a little bit the Prajna Paramita, because it's inevitable. So this is an overview of what we're going to do during these days, the following days. So I'm going to make a brief interruption if you have any question right now, and then we're going to begin with the meditation. So all of you are very welcome. You brave ones who traveled in these times and left your things behind. Can you hear me well? Yes.
Tá tudo bem aí, Carol? Tudo bem? Tá traduzindo? Obrigado.
Lama is asking if everything's okay with the translation.
Retiro globalizado.
This is a global retreat, a person in India translating to English. And then Bakupari making the broadcasting and many people on Zoom in different places, something that we cannot understand. But we keep going. If you have any question here or on Zoom, the photographer came from São Paulo. She has been following me lately. I met the same person in São Paulo and now she's here. She was in Campinas. So we're going to start with a meditation. I think it's better for you not to think in terms of something gradual, because usually we think of, okay, now I get used with my knees and the back, and the better thing is to just start directly. Meditation began directly. This is the best way. And then the body arranges itself, the body, the knees, the back, all of them arrange themselves. If you start with the body, with the knees, with finding the best position, you're never gonna find it. You feel you are a little bit crooked and then you try to come back to a better position, and then you try to have your eye always open, and then tears start to come. So it's not easy. If we start to follow rules of behavior, I remember a practitioner that we had here. He was very strict. I don't know what was his sign, but he was very strict, and he was like someone who couldn't swallow saliva. He wouldn't swallow his saliva, so it was like dripping from the mouth. His eye was completely open, red. He wouldn't move it. But then you don't reach enlightenment. It didn't work. It's complicated. So the best is this aspect that is more direct. For example, if someone suddenly scares us, we're open.
E nós vamos praticar shamatha.
So we practice shamatha. The core of shamatha, the core of the realization of shamatha that will be with us, that will never leave us, is what we describe as dependent arising. So shamatha means overcoming dependent arising. So dependent arising is samsara. So let's imagine that suddenly there's a butterfly flying here in the temple. So everybody is looking at the butterfly. This is the opposite of shamatha. When we look at something, we have this visual contact, and based on this visual contact, our mind gets hooked by that appearance that we saw and begins to follow this. This process of following means creating another image and then another image and then another image and modifying the condition of our energy, and we're following this, so they are successive images. That's why we call it dependent arising, because based on an appearance there is an internal appearance, and then based on that there is another appearance, and successively.
Isso nos
Hear the
oferece
question. This provides us with a referential so that we know whether we are following from within samsara or not. When we observe, when we contemplate the appearances, but we're just following them, we're just producing internal images and having our conditions of energy changing, this means traveling within samsara. This traveling within samsara doesn't affect our Buddha nature. It's actually an exercise of this nature that constructs realities. So in Buddhism, there isn't a center of evil, and there is no evil. There is samsara. The region of samsara is the region in which we operate based on dependent arising. So this is something that we have been doing for a long time and is constantly being improved. We're constantly improving our process of creating images and meanings and having our energy changed. We're doing this all the time. And this is how samsara expands. Samsara is in a constant expansion through this process. This process has no end and no objective, no purpose, no place to arrive. We're simply moving forward without moving forward, because we're just substituting images like one after another. It's like a movie being projected onto a screen, and within the movie there is the infinite, there is time, there are people who are born and die, but in truth there is nothing there. There is no time of those images, there is no reality. Only within the story of the movie. Actually, we are in a reality in which there is no time. It's just a sequence of images, and the sequence of images creates a temporal experience, an experience of existence. And this is the environment where we are. And the crucial element within this is to know whether when we're looking to the movie on the screen, we're following the story of the movie, or we're just resting in this place in which there is no time and no space. So when we are in shamatha, we are in this gateway. We can get out of the movie and rest in a place that is beyond time. But every time I look at the images and then I jump into the movie, I'm now inside the corresponding world, reacting as an identity inside that world. And the movies can have a variety of contents. So dependent arising is this. There is something that I have access to through the organ senses, the five senses or the mind, and I take it as the basis to create sequences of images that produce other images, and it just goes on and on like that. This is samsara. This allows us to understand what shamatha is. In shamatha, we don't enter the movie. We are just sitting in the room. still, we're just still.
A necessidade de operar com olhos, ouvidos, nariz, língua.
If we don't need to operate through the senses to see the movie and etc., we're simply resting with an open consciousness, an open awareness, and we are simply still.
Então nós vamos praticar shamatha desse modo. E, naturalmente, a gente pode
And then naturally,
a nossa prática a partir dos diferentes
is our
estímulos.
practice.
E mais adiante nós vamos ultrapassar os sentidos comuns e vamos olhando outros aspectos. Sempre evitando, então,
So we should always avoid
essencialmente, o
this
aspecto
practice of dependent arising,
fora da realidade, aquilo que nos arrasta por dentro do samsara.
aspect of reality.
Ele se arruma depois. Aí quando a gente começa a praticar, a gente termina arrumando o corpo. A prática de shamatha, ela está longe da prática da iluminação. Mas ela já nos permite entender a prática dos arhats.
The shamatha practice is far from the practice of enlightenment, but it allows us to understand the practice of the arhats. So when realization is complete, there is no longer this entering conditioning states. This is something very important. So the Buddha is considered an arhat. He's an arhat that reached the full enlightenment. So he doesn't oscillate in the circumstances. It's as though he were completely free from samsara. He doesn't enter conditioned states in samsara, and he doesn't enter this process of dependent arising. Actually, he manifests this vow of compassion. He's a Tathagata, and he enters the different worlds. But even though he can talk to the beings in these worlds, he doesn't have any kind of common fixation. He doesn't attribute any kind of reality to these things. This description is presented by the Diamond Sutra. So there, the Buddha practices generosity, but beyond identity, beyond the idea that there is someone offering. So all of this is presented in a very profound way, and we're going to contemplate that in the following days.
Eu acho
But right now, we should develop this skill that comes from the meditation. When we become still, when we stop, and we're no longer following dependent arising, how do we know that we stopped and that we're no longer following the fluxes of dependent arising, the flows of dependent arising? Immediately, we are presented to this lucidity that is self-cognizant, is self-aware. We cannot avoid this because we sit down and then we think, oh, my mind is agitated. And then we can ask, hey, who is saying this? So there is a level of self-perception, self-awareness that recognizes that the mind is agitated. And if the mind is calm, the same thing, we can say, oh, the mind is calm. And then we can ask, hey, who are you? So there is a lucid, self-aware dimension that recognizes that we are calm or that we are agitated. And Dujong Rinpoche describes this.
Aí você segue assim, aí vocês veem que a respiração
Then you continue like this and you realize that the breathing is a little bit artificial.
aí vocês vão olhando os vários estados.
And then you can observe the various states, the various conditions of body that arise, but always trying to avoid to follow and to create successive process of meanings, of creating meanings.
E a gente vai sendo desafiado.
And then we
Os desafios que vêm
begin to be challenged. So there are the challenges that come from the health, for example, pain in the back, pain in the knees, or some kind of fleas flying on our body, or a mosquito. And then we're very quickly dragged to the health. I will only attain enlightenment if this mosquito leaves me alone. Why is he here? Why is he bothering me all the time? And then we go to the house very quickly.
quando vem pernilongo vocês pensam.
When a mosquito come to you, you should think, oh, how good he's on me and not in another practitioner in this room. On me, on my body. This is a bodhisattva, this is a good dream.
Só isso, pessoal.
So that's it.
Não seguir no processo.
We should train not to follow this process because this process of being dragged is the essential basis of samsara. The practice begins from shamatha onwards.
Mas enquanto nós não temos
But
habilidade em
while we don't have any kind of skills in not being dragged, we're simply dragged. That's it.
Então aqui a gente pode, por exemplo,
So here,
processo de
for example, while we are developing this process of self-awareness, we can contemplate the eight consciousness.
parado.
because we are still.
Aí a gente descobre, ou a gente pode treinar especificamente
So, and then we can train specifically in this way.
tudo que está ao redor.
We observe everything around us,
E a gente vê que tudo que está
and then we discover that everything that we see
responder aqui.
in front of us, that we don't have to respond to that.
Vamos supor, nós estamos aqui. Aí tem um cachorro,
So suppose we're here, and then a dog shows up at the door,
desce o cachorro na porta. Aí o cachorro,
and then the dog comes, enters the temple.
responder a isso.
I don't have to respond to this.
Aí eu penso, o cachorro está cheio de pulgas.
And then I can think, oh, this dog is full of fleas. This is a subsequent thought. I don't need to have this thought.
Então isso é o samsara. Samsara não são as
This is samsara. Samsara is not the fleas. Samsara is our mind responding to appearances.
Aí eu descubro que eu posso olhar aqui atrás também.
And then I discover that I can also look at the back.
Nada aqui atrás.
I have to explain to you that I'm actually not seeing anything behind me, but I am seeing because I can guess what is behind me.
Eles botaram café dentro das urnas.
So, for example, I may wonder, oh, did they do the offerings today, the water offerings on the altar?
Tudo
Is
arrumado.
there anything wrong? Is everything organized?
Eu posso
So
acessar mentalmente
I can have access to this mentally, to these images that are behind me.
está no
And sometimes we can save something, for example, a mother who is organizing, tidying up a bedroom, and then she remembers, oh, the pan on the stove. She's not seeing the pan on the stove, but she can access it mentally. And then when we have access to something mentally, we can start responding to that. And this is samsara, this is dependent arising.
Agora a gente não está fazendo nada disso. Então nós podemos
Now we're not doing any of this.
os olhos.
So we can train that which is connected with the eyes.
Aí vocês passam a ouvir. Então vocês
And then you start listening.
passam a ouvir.
Now you can forget the eyes and you concentrate on the listening and the hearing.
E aquilo que a gente ouve, de modo
And that which we hear usually also has a sequence that reverberates internally. But now we're not going to create any kind of sequence. So all the five sense organs and mind,
mentais que brotem,
mental images that arise, we should not produce any kind of sequence.
então aqui são as 6 concêntricas.
So these are the six consciousnesses.
Eventualmente nós podemos treinar
Eventually,
a liberdade diante
we can train our freedom
estabilidade
um,
vários tipos de energia.
regarding the six consciousnesses, stabilizing the different kinds of energy. So when we're still practicing this way, our self-awareness allows us to recognize that
Que nós estamos com uma energia
that our energy is stabilized. So we can recognize an aspect that has to do with earth.
nós não estamos seguindo aparências de olhos, ouvidos, nariz, língua.
So we're not following the appearances of the six senses and mind.
Estamos ancorados
We are based on the stability of the body.
essa estabilidade, ela não está
This stability is not based on some kind of rigidity.
uma leveza.
So it's as if it had a lightness, as if there was the possibility of movement, but it doesn't move. This is not a stability based on tension.
Nós estamos estáveis,
We are stable and light.
respiração é natural.
Our breathing is natural. The air element operates naturally.
Vocês podem perceber que a energia
You
associada
can recognize that the energy connected with breathing reverberates throughout the body.
isso já é o elemento fogo.
And this is already the fire element.
Vocês podem perceber que é o elemento éter, tem uma
You can also recognize the ether element.
presença
There is a presence that is alive in the mind.
e aí vocês podem contemplar o espaço aberto.
Then you can contemplate this open space, this natural freedom of the mind.
Nós estamos estáveis,
We are stable
sem tensão, o elemento
in the earth element. There is no tension. The water element, the air element, all are stable. We're breathing with our whole body, and we're manifesting the fire element in every part of the body and in the collection of parts in our body. And this manifests as a natural freedom of this broad mind.
as aparências de olhos não são
The appearances of eyes are not followed,
nem de nariz, língua,
neither are the appearances of ears or all other appearances followed, and there are no subsequent constructions in the mind.
quem vê tudo isso? Quem vê a estabilidade?
Who sees all of that? Who sees the stability? Who recognizes the element, the earth element, air element, water element, ether, space? Who recognizes that we're not following the five senses or the mind? And how is this seen? How is this recognized?
Nós vemos que a mente está presente e não
So we see that the mind is present and it's not following, it's not creating
dependente desse
any movement of dependent arising.
Então nós estamos fazendo a prática de shamatha.
So when we're doing this, we're doing the practice of shamatha.
A prática de shamatha, ela atravessa
The shamatha practice
o outro lado e efetivamente
breaks through to the other side. It effectively puts us in a condition of practitioners.
com a consciência, a mente
So the
reconhecendo
awareness, the mind, recognizing what it does
circunstâncias,
within the different circumstances,
torna
this mind
outro tipo de operação mental.
becomes a different kind of mental operation.
Nós víamos a nossa mente operando
In
através
the past, our mind used to operate through sequences of imagination, luminous sequences of appearances that are produced by dependent arising. But now we stopped this, and our mind is contemplating itself. It's self aware, and by doing this, we go through a gateway and we leave behind the ordinary experience of the eight consciousnesses, which are the essence of samsara. They are the ordinary aspect of samsara, but now we have gone through that.
experiência.
And we do it through this experience in which we become more and more present, more and more lucid regarding the very operation of mind through this process, which is self awareness, the mind recognizing what it's doing.
O próprio Buda Sakyamuni diz que é o caminho
Buddha Shakyamuni said that there is the internalizing path of the wise ones, which is this, and there is the externalizing path of the world, which is the opposite. It's when I'm responding to the sense organs and mind, and I'm producing successive experiences one after another. So, this path of samsara is a path of multiplicity, expansion, diversity, of incessant action, whereas the internalizing path is the path that all Buddhas followed to achieve enlightenment. And this is what the Buddha describes.
uma parte importante do nosso
So I consider that an important part of our retreat is to actually practice shamatha, to develop this skill.
se nós, por exemplo, podemos
If, for example, we're able to sit calmly,
autoconscientes e estáveis,
and we're self-aware and stable, this is really, really important.
esse é um recurso que nós vamos usar muitas vezes.
This is a resource that we're going to use many times. When we're in different environments within samsara, we can again sit down and then we discover that this is the same place always. What changed were the appearances that were oscillating around us, but now we're again in the same place. We gradually discovered that in this place there is no time, our appearance, so we arise as self-awareness. The operation of the mind takes place with the contemplation of the inner aspects. And when we see that, we don't find any trace of time. It's as if we were timeless in this contemplation. Since we're not using the sense organs, the five senses, and we're not using mind as in the sense of contents, this operation can be regarded as being beyond the 12 links of dependent arising, as being beyond the experiences of the bardos, beyond the bardo of life, the bardo of meditation, beyond the bardo of dream, the bardo of dying, the bardo of the after death, and the bardo of rebirth. The strength of this experience is not, it doesn't lie in any discursive aspect, in any kind of study. It's simply the observation, the contemplation that comes from self-awareness. The mind is conscious of itself. The mind cannot hide from itself.
Dentro dessa experiência não há identidade.
Inside this experience, there is no identity. There's no thinking like, oh, today I'm going to meditate as an engineer. It doesn't make any sense. Today I'm going to meditate as an artist. Or I'm going to meditate as a man or as a woman, or as a young person, an old person, a child. There's no difference. There's nothing that tells us that we're human beings when we're practicing shamatha. It has nothing to do with our humanity. If you contemplate the teachings of the Nikayas, there's nothing else but practice instructions. He doesn't tell us what we're gonna see. He simply says, he simply tells us to see, to observe. And how do we contemplate the body? We contemplate the body as a body. how do we contemplate the mind? We contemplate the mind as a mind. We look into it. It's very direct.
Mas nesses dias eu não vou deixar vocês praticando
But
assim.
during these days, I'm not gonna let you practice like this calmly. I'm gonna bring many words,
Nós vamos olhando outras coisas.
and we're gonna also contemplate other things, other aspects.
Aí as coisas se complicam assim um pouco, né?
And then things get a little complicated. How do we make things complicated?
Sem praticar,
We cannot practice shamatha without the preliminaries. And then, okay, we already made everything complicated. And what are the preliminaries?
a gente começa a
The
praticar,
preliminaries are like this. When we start practicing shamatha,
somos invadidos por coisas
let's suppose we are invaded by things that we consider crucial, very important, that the Buddha didn't consider, but now us in real life, we need to consider them. So each of us, we have things that we consider real and very important. So it's necessary to purify the real things. We have to purify previously those things. Otherwise, we're gonna always be very sensitive to things that we consider crucial and we think we have to pay attention to them.
Então a purificação, ela vem desse
So
aí a purificação
this is the purification.
nos ajuda, por exemplo,
And the purification helps us avoid
a evitar
diseases, conflict, and then we discover this. So this is a very important stage
a nossa
that supports our practice.
a gente não precisa preliminar.
However, if we sit down and we practice and our practice works, then we don't need the preliminaries, because before the preliminaries, we have the preliminaries of the preliminaries and there is no end. So the path, we realize that it's constructed from the end until the beginning. So we begin by the end, and then if it doesn't work, we come back a little bit. We don't create anything after that.
Poder resolver por dentro da prática os
We
obstáculos.
go directly to the practice, and if we're able to solve all the obstacles within the practice, then it's great. If we're not able to do that, we can write down all the people, circumstances, situations, emotions that invade our practice and disturb our practice. Write down all of this carefully, and then practice metabhavana. Aspire that these beings be happy, that they overcome suffering, that they find the causes of happiness, that they overcome the causes of suffering, that they overcome all their karmas, and etc. And this is not very easy.
Uma relação com alguém.
Let's imagine you have a relationship with someone. Well, you are all practitioners, or you no longer have this kind of problem, but let's imagine that you had some kind of trouble with someone.
Surge na mente,
And then when this arises in the mind,
super
so the Buddha told me to aspire that they be happy, that they overcome suffering. But I don't know if I should aspire this for them or for myself. I don't know what I really want anymore. So we get hooked.
ele é aquele que
And Mara is the one who offers what we want. And that's why we get fixated, stuck. So we're doing the practice and we think, oh, may they be happy, may they find the causes of happiness. Well, I don't know what are the causes of happiness, but may they overcome suffering, the causes of suffering. But then we start aspiring, no, let me be the cause of happiness, and the other annoying people, they should be the cause of suffering. I want happiness to come to myself. This is Mara talking to us and saying, keep on practicing Metta Bhavana and he will come back to you. This is samsara. So suddenly we're now here practicing under the guidance of Mara. So this can happen very possibly. And then the Buddha would say, Mara, I can see you. When the Buddha was practicing, Mara would show up. But the Buddha would say, Mara, I can see you.
Nós pensamos, se eu fizer isso, então aquilo, eu vou obter mais isso, que vai ser super bom. A gente não está olhando.
Then we think, oh, and if I do this, if I do that, I get this, I get that. And then we're not listening, we're not looking into the natural lucidity. We're thinking about how we can make things happen and how we can make them go to a direction that we want them to go and things like that.
Pode verdadeiramente acontecer.
So we it becomes something very ordinary and it can happen in our practice. So while we're doing shamatha,
Assim, quando esses fatores acontecem, a gente vai usar
so when these things happen, we should use Metta Bhavana to establish a relationship of equanimity, compassion, love, joy in all directions with all beings. And especially equanimity, because when we break with equanimity, then we get dragged. It's like Mara. And then later in the future, based on the vow, on the Bodhisattva vow, we start to operate in the world to create pure lands. And this is another kind of skill. And at this moment when we're operating to create worlds and realities, we're no longer being dragged by the 12 links and dependent arising. We're now producing things and movements that are favorable for the beings within their conditioned experiences. But we are not ourselves thinking that those things are actually manifestations of pure lands of or a real situation. We understand that they are samsara.
Sim,
so this is something that is a little bit difficult to understand in the beginning. But we can keep on progressing. Here, right now, the most important is to understand that there is the practice of shamatha, and we should develop this ability. This is not a cognitive ability. It's a direct ability, a direct skill.
Efetivamente entendermos
if we actually understand that there is an inner process that becomes lucid, and if we actually understand all mental appearances, and if we take refuge in this process of contemplation, if we take this process as the main process of our practice, then we're actually progressing on the path. And then we will overcome the fixation on appearance, and then we take refuge in this lucid process. And this is the practice of shamatha.
Atingem a perfeição disso.
Our hearts achieve the perfection of this. But enlightenment is not this yet. But this is a very important stage.
enquanto a gente se livra de olhos, ouvidos,
So while we're getting rid of the five senses and the mind, we can also contemplate the fact that the contents related to the five senses and mind, they vary according to our mental dispositions.
então nós estamos com
So
uma disposição mental,
we have a certain mental disposition, and then we can contemplate these mental dispositions as if they were descriptions of our very identity.
e a gente vê perfeitamente os 6 reinos.
And then we see clearly, perfectly, the 6 realms. We look around, when we look around based on happiness, this is completely different than looking around based on anger or the feeling of this, or the sensation of violence or fear. These are completely different experiences. And just right now, we can shift from one realm to another. We can consider that this is a Dharma realm, or this is a realm of happiness, a realm of samsara gods, a realm of demigods, a realm of humans, a realm of animals, a realm of hungry ghosts, or a realm of hells. We can shift from one to another. Just by remaining here, we can do that. The inner position of the mind defines the experience around us. When I'm not following any of these experiences, then I am practicing shamatha beyond the 7th consciousness. When I'm practicing shamatha based on a mental disposition, for example, of the human realm or the God realm or the hell realm, then I'm practicing shamatha under the influence of a mind that belongs to samsara. So I'm not actually practicing shamatha. In order to practice shamatha, I have to get free from the 5 senses and mind. I have to remember the 7th consciousness that defines the mental dispositions according to which I look at everything. The 7th consciousness creates the sensation that we are practicing. There is an I, a self practicing. I can say, oh, I went to bed at a certain time, I woke up at a certain time, I ate, and then I came here, and now Lama is saying that I don't exist. Well, what is it? How am I gonna get rid of these who did all of that? This is not an I, this is the 7th consciousness, guys. And how do we know that this is the 7th consciousness? Because we can look at it. There is this self-awareness, this lucid self-awareness is looking at the 7th consciousness. It's looking at all of this. The idea that I woke up, that I went to bed late, and etc. And who is looking at all of this? It's something or someone that is looking to this. And so this self-awareness is what can say, now you are here sitting down in the middle of your thoughts and wanting to live. So this awareness is conscious of all of these states. And at the same time, now we can get rid of this aspect of the 7th consciousness, of the 7th conscious, and we come back to this focus that shines and is still. In each of these cases, you can imagine that you are in a Zen room and there is a master walking down slowly. along the line of practitioners, and he has a huge stick. I mean, Manjushri sword. Then he's walking, holding that. And then we are thinking, oh, why this, why that? And then he comes and hits us on the back. When it hits our back, all thoughts evaporate, they dissolve. All meanings of identities related to the five senses and mind, all of them dissolve. Everything evaporates. Our sleepiness, the sensation that it's impossible to keep sitting for one more moment, all of this disappears. And not only in the person that was hit, but in the whole room, it disappears.
Vê o aspecto onírico da identidade.
So we recognize the dream aspect of identity because it becomes smoke, it dissolves very quickly. That's why we call it the Manjushri sword. Now we can, for example, take refuge in the identity of the environment as a whole. So, for example, there is the door, here is the temple, there is the dining hall, the dormitories, the car. Our cell phone is somewhere calling us. And this mental environment arises as the eighth consciousness. It becomes a place that is dense, completely solid and real. Naturally, with tension or without tension, it's completely real. We're here. Then, for example, we have a son or a daughter somewhere saying, oh, father, you have to come pick us up at school. And then you think, no, I'm going. I'm a little bit late, but I'm going. So we are within a reality that looks completely real. And then we're taken to another level of experience suddenly. And then this person realizes that she was in the eighth consciousness in a region of reality, and then she moved to another region of reality. We can see that, we can recognize that when we're practicing shamatha, we are beyond the eighth consciousness. When we're practicing shamatha, we're nowhere. We are within the great opening of the mind. We're not an identity practicing somewhere, and we're not responding to the five senses or the constructions in the mind, or the feeling of the sensation of an identity or an environment. We're not responding to any of that. So this is something extraordinary. Shamatha is something extraordinary. So that's where we are. How do we know that we're there? Because mind is self-aware. It's self-aware that we are there. Our earth energy is stabilized, as well as our water energy, air energy, fire energy, ether energy, and the space energy. All of them are stable. And then we maintain Rigpa self-awareness.
É consciente da mente.
Mind is aware of itself.
Estamos praticando além das 8 consciências. Então nós
In
atravessamos
this way, we're practicing beyond the 8 consciousnesses. In this way, we have gone through this entryway of the 8 consciousnesses. This is the most important part of our practice. We need to go beyond this gateway of the 8 consciousnesses.
deixar espaço.
So now I'm gonna, if you have any questions,
Nós vamos praticar das 11 ao meio-dia. Então já dei essa instrução.
and then we're gonna practice from 11 to 12. I don't know.
Não, mas agora às 11 horas eu vou deixar esse espaço aí. Nesse espaço você
So now at 11 o'clock you can do practice. So now you have the instruction of the shamatha practice.
eu vou deixar uma
So if you have any questions,
depois vai ser a prática.
and then later you're gonna do the practice.
Pode falar. Marta,
Marta, you can ask.
Oi, Marta, a gente não consegue te ouvir, Marta.
We can't hear.
qual é a instrução aqui? Eu estou falando, eles estão ouvindo. Se eles
Oi,
falarem...
Marta, a gente não te ouve, não.
We're having some technical issues. We can't hear Marta. I think it's Marta's computer.
Tá ligado o microfone? A gente não está ouvindo. Será que a Guta podia falar para a
We
gente
can't
testar?
hear her. Guta, could you try and speak so that,
Guta, a gente está ouvindo.
yes, we can hear her. So the problem is with Marta.
A Marta sempre causando aqui na nossa...
Marta is always creating problems, of course.
A gente não ouviu, Marta.
Talvez seja aquela
We can't
questão
hear Marta.
do Zoom.
O pessoal está sugerindo que tu saia e volte. Ou
So
saia...
we are talking about technical possibilities. Now, can you hear me? Yes. Now it's working.
Vou para outro lugar para sair de perto do computador para não dar microfonia.
Okay.
Lama,
Sim.
é sobre a questão das identidades.
Lama, it has to do with the identities.
Quando a gente fala em identidade,
When we
normalmente
talk about identities, usually we think of like, oh, I'm the housewife, I'm the teacher, now I'm this, now I'm that. It has to do with the things that we're doing. But what about behavior? Like, I am like this, I cannot change. This is how I am, I behave in this way.
a gente precisa se desapegar desses
We
comportamentos.
also need to
Mudança interna de comportamento.
get rid of these behaviors, right? How can we have an inner transformation of behavior? So within the classification of teachings, this has to do with a stage that comes before shamatha. This is not the focus of shamatha. The focus of shamatha is not to change our identity. So for example, I'm practicing shamatha. So when the shamatha is over, I can recognize there's a natural lucidity. So I come to the ordinary world after the practice. I don't recognize very clearly how it arises. And in this world, I arise with an identity that is not very appropriate. And then we can ask ourselves, what can I do so that I don't get fixated on identities, also that I don't get fixated on improper, inadequate identities. If we have a basis of shamatha, then we have some level of freedom in relation to the seventh consciousness. And then in this case, I'm able to shift from one region of Alaya Vijnana to another. But the bodhisattvas, when they practice shamatha and they progress through shamatha, they end up making the vow of bodhicitta. So they want to benefit other beings. So after meditation, they are still permeated by this. They still have this aspiration of helping overcome their obstacles and bring benefit to them. But sometimes they have problems, sometimes they remember, sometimes they forget it. So there is like this gray area in which we have a little bit of lucidity, a little bit we don't have it. But then gradually the bodhisattvas will manifest more and more based on bodhicitta, and then identities become something unnecessary. They are regarded as something unnecessary, and they abandon the language of identity. They realize that the language of identity is imprecise, it's not real. So for a long time, we had this notion that identities are real. But now the bodhisattvas, they overcome this. They're no longer fixated on this. They're not looking for real identities. They realize that the only real thing is the lucidity that is on the basis of everything. And then gradually they shift from one to another. So it's not within shamatha that I try to change my behavior, but shamatha will help me
Fora da prática de shamatha, no meu
outside the practice of shamatha in my daily life. As I progress in the shamatha practice, I have more ability to change my improper behaviors. Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Lama. But proper and improper behavior, they acquire a semblance of equanimity, equality. Whether they are adequate or inadequate, they're like parts of a movie. So we should try to escape from this situation of responding in a conditioned way to whatever appears. When we are conditioned, then there are things that we think are better, other things we think are worse. But this is not the solution because I'm still
Estação luminosa de originação dependente, ilusória. Eu não estou
some
conseguindo.
kind of conditioned manifestation.
A gente vai fazendo esse movimento.
Gratidão, Lama.
Thank you, Lama. I think there's a question here at the temple. There's a question in the chat from Kira. She asks if it's common in the shamatha practice to see colorful appearances in front, like they have no definite forms, they're like colorful manifestations. Yeah, it can happen. This is the natural luminous aspect of the mind. The mind can produce, based on different regions of samsara, it can produce images. It can we can convert this into the practice. Like we look at the colors, the blue, the white, where is this coming from? And then we can see the luminous power of the mind that produces the colors of the appearances. Is there another question? Yeah.
Que você faz.
Lama, based on the description of the consciousness, with shamatha, we acquire freedom regarding these referentials of alaya vijnana. But with this description of this progressive deepening of shamatha, we don't acquire a lucidity regarding alaya vijnana, but about what is produced. At some point, we will have some kind of clarity regarding what are the referentials that are operating within the shamatha practice. We will progressively, even though this is not the objective of shamatha, but since we get distracted, there are the experiences of the five senses and mind, and then we end up looking at them and recognizing what they are. And in the same way, the experiences of the seventh and eighth consciousness arise. I don't have to focus on them so that they arise. They arise as karmic impulses. So if I keep contemplating in a liberated way, then I'm practicing vipassana because I'm beginning to see things as they are, and this is already vipassana. So shamatha and vipassana are together, and when I deepen the shamatha experience, the previous parts, so for example, body posture and the fixation in one element or another, we begin to feel that there's some kind of artificiality to this. And then we can improve the practices and become free from the artificialities of the very practice. We're moving towards a natural position that has no conditioning. Because every conditioning, we end up recognizing it and then we can liberate it. And this is the path of the Buddha. That's why he can go through all the 31 worlds from the hells to Nirodha. He can go through all of this, and we say that he's free from all mental states. He's not following any mental state. This is the Buddha that is liberated. So the very meditative process has some conditionings, and these conditionings will progressively be recognized and liberated. There's another question. I always, a big challenge of us who are trying to practice, but also we have world activities like job and family. The big challenge I always wonder what are the limits of the responsibilities that we have with all of these demands, and how much do we really have to attend that. So this is always a challenge for me. I don't know if you can comment briefly on this. We have the power, or we should have the power of transforming all our actions into actions that are based on the motivation of bodhicitta. This is the Mahayana path. So, for example, if we get isolated, if we isolate from all beings, and if we don't create anything favorable For the beings who are close to us, this is also an obstacle.
faz as próprias ações. Mas as
So we do the actions, but our actions are neither perfect nor free from pain, and nor do they solve anything, but they help.
então, a criação das terras puras
So the creation of pure lands,
não propriamente
it comes from within our minds. It doesn't come from practical actions. The practical actions that we do can always be converted into one realm or another. But within our mind, we maintain the aspiration of bringing benefits to beings through our actions.
de bodhicitta.
And this is the process of bodhicitta. Our challenge
Conseguir, enfim, transformar,
is to be able to transform
entrar no samsara
what made us enter samsara with the aspirations and ordinary conditionings. We should transform this into bodhicitta, and this is the purification. But whether we do more or less actions, this is not so important. What is really important is that anything that we do comes from this motivation of bodhicitta. And then naturally, that which doesn't need to be done, we stop to do it. And what is useful from within the perspective of bodhicitta, we start to do it more. We expand it, always keeping the understanding that there is no solution for samsara within the conditioned world. And yet, we shouldn't stop operating within the conditioned world at some level. This is the example that Buddha himself gave. He never stopped operating within the conditioned world, meeting people, talking to people,
por vezes fosse até
even though sometimes what he offered to people were contradictory. Some people didn't feel completely benefited. But that's how it is. We keep going.
enquanto nós
There's a contradiction that we have to accept as we move within the world of samsara. And then we keep going, trying to
uma terra
create
melhor,
a pure land, a better environment for beings. Even if there are contradictions, if
mesmo que tenha contradições, ela não
this stage of creating a better world for beings, even though there are contradictions, it has no end. There's never a point in which all actions have been done. So this is a field where training takes place, and it has an inherent suffering, it's samsara.
a gente não vai encontrar felicidade dentro
We
desse
will not find happiness within this environment.
iluminação, mas não a felicidade.
We will attain enlightenment and liberation, but not happiness.
Uma gota, por favor.
So Gutta, please.
Bom dia, Lama.
Good morning, Lama. Good morning. Thank you for the teachings.
De volta.
It's so good that you're well, that you're back.
Pra ti não tem diferença nenhuma, né? Que tu tá aí no
For you, there's no difference. You're always there in the Zoom. Actually, it's because when you travel, it looks like, I don't know, but actually you're always close because you're within my heart. That's it's always okay.
Duas questões com
I
relação
have two questions regarding shamatha. One of them is that
eu noto que eu respiro curto.
I notice that my breath is short, my breathing, and sometimes I don't even breathe.
Parece que o natural é esse.
It
Às vezes,
seems that the natural thing to do is this.
se eu tentar, parece que fica
But if
artificial.
I try to breathe longer, it looks a little bit artificial. Is there is it something bad or
Quando tu respirar curto, tu te dá conta, eu tô
When
respirando
you
curto.
breathe short, you just notice that I'm breathing short. When you breathe long, you just notice I'm breathing long, because shamatha practice is self-awareness. So whatever is happening, it's not really so crucial. The thing is that you're paying attention. If you're inclined, if you're sitting in one way or another, this is not the point. The point is that you should be beyond the five senses, beyond the mind, identity, and alaya vijnana. This is our practice. The practice of this awareness regarding a world that doesn't come from the five senses and the mind and the identities.
A outra questão,
Okay. The other question is,
no dia a dia,
in my daily life,
percebo assim que a
I
minha mente
notice that
ela está
very often
chama, sabe?
it's as though my mind were in shamatha, and I'm able, like you said, the mother who is in the room, and then I realize that I notice things, especially in my home, and I always associated this with intuition. Like, for example, I get to the room exactly at the time when my father is sitting on the bed, is trying to get up by himself. And today, when you mentioned this,
acesso uma coisa
because it's like I have access to something that is happening in a different environment and I'm not there.
com chamata,
Does it have any connection with shamatha? No, it has nothing to do with shamatha.
Então a gente tem várias.
So
Ela não se separa, ela não tá.
our mind is not separate. It's not ours. There are different consciousnesses operating, but this is not what we're focusing right now. But we have this experience, it happens.
Fluxos de consciência que
We have
ocorrem.
these various flows of consciousnesses that take place. That there is a part that is more conscious, and there are other parts that also help us. Our consciousness is complex, it has many characteristics. But here, we're training the focus of consciousness or awareness.
Muito obrigada, Lama.
Thank you, Lama.
Uma pole, por favor.
So, Polly, please.
Consegue me ouvir?
Hi, Lama, can you hear me? Yes, perfectly.
Lama, quando a gente
Lama, when
disse
we're
que quando
practicing shamatha,
a pessoa ela
it's said that when there is the attainment of shamatha, we're able to have access to different worlds.
os outros reinos e
We're able to look, to see the other realms and have access to different minds. So we have access to the eighth consciousness in a way that is broader. And how can we look at this without reifying these things as something external?
a gente começa a ver as
And
os outros fluxos de consciência, a gente começa
so we begin to see the other flows of consciousnesses. We begin to understand the way the other beings are understanding the world. But I think this is not it also. So in what sense, how is it that we have access to other consciousness, but we don't reify them as something external? Since this description of shamatha associated with the eight consciousness, it comes from the perspective of samsara. We have the feeling that there is someone that goes, that enters the various worlds and etc. But while we're thinking it this way, we're going to have problems because there isn't a somebody. And that's exactly because of this, that there isn't someone. That's why this is possible. because the mind is free from being something. That's why the mind is able to enter different circumstances. It's because it has this natural freedom. So, for example, if we're focused in a movie, if we make some effort, we can enter another movie. But if we're able to get to be free, liberated from the identities of the movies, then we can move in different flows.
Dentro daquilo, ela
So, but how does it happen? Is because we develop the ability of self-awareness. We know that we're not that. We know that the mind is operating within different appearances, different flows, but we are not that. And these things, these appearances, that these flows, they have no
ele entrava
reality
não é assim,
conditioned other than this conditioned reality.
e ela
So, for example, someone traveled and left the airplane and went to another country.
aí a mente ela é livre
We enter another world
de viagens que ela já fez.
in the same way. We understand that we have done many different trips, many times to many different places. And in the middle of all of this, we realize that we have already entered the hells, entered the different realms, and now we're able to look at the different conditionings and understand how the worlds arise based on these conditionings. But we don't have the feeling that we are someone within these conditionings that is somebody. We feel that we are freedom, a lucid freedom that understands how the worlds arise. And that's how we can break through the worlds of the eighth consciousness of Alaya Vijnana. We can transform any experience into an experience of lucidity.
Não significa que ela tenha iluminação.
But it doesn't mean that we have enlightenment yet, because we may not understand the emptiness of this. So we move towards this mirror wisdom that is able to understand the different worlds and the different views. Yes.
Se a pessoa ela
But for
tiver
example,
a vacuidade de todas as
if we
experiências,
have a clear notion of the emptiness of all appearances, then we come closer to the mirror wisdom. But if we're practicing shamatha and these appearances arise and other appearances arise, but we don't have an understanding of emptiness, then we may think that these environments that we can access them, we can have access to them, but we're not fixated on any of them, but we still attribute some kind of reality to these worlds.
vários mundos.
In the mirror wisdom, there isn't a feeling of reality, but sometimes in shamatha, we can have this feeling that these worlds, they are real.
Obrigada.
A gente apenas evita entrar neles.
We just avoid entering them. We leave it behind.
E nós
Obrigada,
estamos
Lama.
usando sempre a roda do Dharma, né? Então a gente vai
So then we're always using the Dharma wheel, so we can deepen different aspects and then go back to previous aspects and do this in a circular way. And then we can purify everything. Thank you, Pauline. Vanya, please.
Oi, Lama.
Hi, Lama. Good morning.
Obrigada pela oportunidade.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Básica e talvez
Maybe my question is a bit too basic and maybe you have already answered it, but
na minha mente
what I have been thinking is
é a capacidade de manter o foco na consciência.
the capacity of, is it the capacity of keeping the focus on self-awareness that will interrupt the flow of dependent arising? And for example, in formal practice, when we sit,
eu mantenho a consciência ali presente.
while I'm maintaining the self-awareness, while I'm present regarding everything that is happening, sometimes this is interrupted, but very quickly, dependent arising is already happening, and I'm already lost from the practice, and then I recognize it and come back. But this capacity of maintaining the self-awareness for a longer time, this will come with the practice, right? And is this also karmically determined? For example, my mental flux, it travels too much, but other people are more stable. Is this karmic? And is it only through practice that I'm going to break through this? Yeah, this is. It's karmic in everyone. It happens. Some people have more ability, others have less. In the beginning, if the person didn't train, this is a karmic ability of the person who sits down and already has this. It's because she or he practiced in a previous life.
Sim. Os geminianos, por exemplo.
So people of the Gemini sign, they don't have this ability. Oh my God, that's me. I am a great astrologer.
Mas aí, o que acontece? Aí, enfim, a pessoa nasceu.
What happens? So we were born like this. We're going to practice in this life. And then next life, maybe we come as a Pisces.
Quando a gente senta, se a gente está
So
agitado,
when we sit down, whether we're agitated or not, we see that we're agitated or that we're not agitated. This is the practice. So this is not the point whether we are or not, but whether we are seeing or not. I think it's always better when it's something sudden. We just see directly. All of us, we have the power of stopping, being still. And if it gets disturbed, we can do it again, we can stop again, we can become still again. And then that's how we develop the skill, the ability.
Então, diferentes momentos, nós temos.
So in different moments,
Diferentes pessoas
we
têm.
have different skills. It's easier or more difficult, but we are trainable. We can be trained.
O que pet faz?
For example, you can go to YouTube and search for videos of what pets can do. They can do so many things. If they can be trained, then of course we're saved. We have seen cats doing so many things that are unimaginable.
Conseguem fazer aquilo para
They
ganhar
focus and they are able to do extraordinary things just to gain something. Maybe we should meditate in this way, like we should put things in front of us that we want.
Quer dizer que enquanto geminiano, então, eu vou ter que vir,
So that means that as a Gemini, I have to pray to be born in Abirachi. Because if I don't get to achieve enlightenment in this life,
São inteligentes.
Gemini, they work, they are intelligent.
Lá. Assim, ninguém vai aguentar mais.
So it's good that they go to Abirachi.
Meu lugar tá lá, já guardado.
Com certeza.
Tá, Lama, obrigada.
Lá tem várias aldeias dentro
In
da
Abirachi, there are different communities within the community. So you can choose a community that is more Gemini.
Vou lembrar disso. Grata, Lama.
Thank you, Lama.
Alegria de ter te visto aí esses dias.
Ah, igualmente, coração
Yeah, it
ficou
was
bem.
very good to see you.
Então, Bakupari, por favor.
Bakupari, please. I don't know who's still there.
Pode falar, André.
Hi, Lama, can you hear me?
Com a pergunta dela, então foi bem bom. Então só queria saber se o Lama
Polly already answered with her question, but I just wanted to know if Lama is gonna talk a little bit more about this tomorrow.
Vai
Yes, don't worry. We're just in the beginning.
umas sugestões.
Tá bem.
já respondeu
Pode mandar.
a pergunta dela.
Obrigado, Lama.
Eu só queria saber se o Lama
Thank you, Lama.
A Vânia já falou, Sabacvari. Agora a Bela.
Bella, now.
Bela,
Good morning, Lama.
tá onde agora?
Where are you now? I'm at Mandila.
Tá. Só que tá tudo alagado, a gente tá ilhado
Is
aqui.
everything all right there? Yes, but it rained too much, so yeah, our road is blocked. So you have an obstruction there. Yes, there are obstacles here.
Mas deixa eu pensar um pouco. Aí tem
But
aquele
let me
corte
think.
transbordou.
There is the ice stream there. Did it overflow? Yes. Someone sent us a video of the cattle. They are being submerged by the water. It's very sad.
O Guru Rinpoche tá
And what
muito-
about Guru Rinpoche's lake? No, nobody went there to see because it's been so much rain that we didn't even leave our homes. We don't know. And what about the higher part of the terrain? Yeah, all the houses, they are okay, but I haven't yet gone there to see the lake.
Lama, eu fiquei com uma dúvida só.
Lama, I have a question. I always have the impression that I'm skipping shamatha and I have to go back.
Mas quando o senhor falou para Guta,
When you talked to Gutta, I had this, it came to my mind, the Satipatthana Sutta.
para Vipassana.
No, Satipatthana is more connected with Vipassana. Okay, but when I contemplate breathing as breathing, when I observe if I'm breathing long or breathing short, when you said this, I remember the Satipatthana Sutta. Yes, but in the Satipatthana Sutta, we are within the perspective of Vipassana.
Eu vou ultrapassar essa
In Shamatha,
Mas quando eu me perco em Shamatha, o
when I
melhor que
get
pode
lost in Shamatha, the best thing that I can do is to practice Vipassana. So whatever appears, I start to look at it with the eye of Vipassana. Then it's perfect. We shift from one to another, from Shamatha to Vipassana. Yes, because they're inseparable.
se nós estamos conscientes de que nós
So,
estamos
for example, if we are aware that we are still, this is already some level of Vipassana. And also, when I practice shamatha, I think it's very good, but I know it's completely conditioned. But when I concentrate the mind, it's as though the body begins to dissolve. I lose the sensations of the body. Do I have to go back to the body, or is it okay just to relax and let go? No, you can just relax and let go.
ultrapassando olhos, ouvidos, nariz, língua e
Because then you are overcoming the five senses and other sensations of body. You are acquiring this focus, but then later it will come back, and then you can contemplate the body, body as body, eyes as eyes, and this is a vipassana practice. They come together.
Ou seja, quando tu avança de um jeito, aí
So when you progress in one, then the other comes, and etc.
aí no fim Shamatha vai virar
At the end, shamatha becomes this place that is free. It progresses towards the primordial nature, and vipassana progresses towards primordial wisdom. Thank you, Lama.
não sei se o Bakupari aqui ia falar.
I don't know if Bakupari wants to say something else. No.
Então agora,
So now we're gonna do the dedication, and afterwards you're gonna do the practice until 12 o'clock. Thank you, Carol.
Deu certo a tradução, Carol? Eu fico falando meio aleatório aqui, não sei como é que tu resolve.
Lama is asking if the translation is okay. I think so.
Tem texto, né?
It's easier when there is a text. Yes.
Que os méritos desse encontro se expandam e toquem a todos. Que o Mestre Universal da Paz e da Compaixão, Sua Santidade Dalai Lama, juntamente com todos os mestres de todas as tradições que veiculam essa mensagem, tenham longa vida. Que todos estejam a salvo de gerar pensamentos negativos, o obstáculo mais destrutivo. Que esses pensamentos nunca surjam em nossa mente. E que todos os seres também estejam livres de pensamentos negativos. Ao longo de minhas muitas vidas e até este momento, todas as virtudes que tenho alcançado, inclusive os méritos gerados por esta prática e todas as que vier a conseguir, ofereço para o bem-estar dos seres sencientes. Possam a doença, guerra, fome e sofrimento diminuir para todos os seres, enquanto sua sabedoria e compaixão aumentam nesta em vidas futuras. Possa eu claramente perceber todas as experiências como sendo tão insubstanciais quanto o tecido do sonho durante a noite, e imediatamente despertar para perceber a manifestação de sabedoria pura no surgir de cada fenômeno. Possa eu rapidamente alcançar a iluminação para trabalhar sem cessar pela liberação de todos os seres, Budas e Bodhisattvas em conjunto, seja qual for a sua motivação, sua ação benéfica e preces auspiciosas, seja qual for a sua onisciência, realizações e poderes benévolos, e seja qual for a sua imensa sabedoria, eu que igualmente venho para beneficiar os seres, rogo para que possa alcançar as mesmas qualidades. Neste exato momento, possam nem mesmo os nomes doença, fome, guerra e sofrimento ser ouvidos pelas pessoas e nações da Terra, mas possam sim sua conduta moral, mérito, riqueza e prosperidade crescer, e possam a suprema bem-aventurança e bem-estar sempre surgir para ela. King Lom Cho Song Ring Lon Chen Za Ling Sa Song Para Pao Dragyo Cho Song Wadai Medrau Do Song Gelen Cho. Então, muito obrigado por enquanto. Aí eu volto às 3.
Thank you for now. So I'll be back at 3 o'clock. I'm gonna be here from 3 to 5.
Iluminação, pessoal.
Until 3, you can meditate from 2 to 3, and then from 3 to 5, I'm going to give teachings.
Eu tô saindo aqui e vai ficar aberto. Tchau, pessoal.
So I'm going to leave now, and the camera will remain open.
Vou ficar das 3 às 5.